1MDB, born in 1981 in Penang, Malaysia, Low Taek Joe, known as Joe Low, was a businessman who never held formal leadership in the state fund One Malaysia Development Berhad, but was broadly considered the mastermind behind one of the world's biggest financial scandals. 1MDB was created in 2009 with the goal of promoting economic development in Malaysia. Instead, billions of dollars were allegedly diverted. U.S. investigators estimate over $4.5 billion was misappropriated from 1MDB by Low and others, routed through shell companies and offshore accounts to buy luxury items, real estate, even financing films. When the scandal broke in 2015, creditors and governments demanded answers. Investigations flagged irregular bond issues arranged by major global banks, massive debt under the fund, and lavish spending that couldn't be justified by any business plan. Malaysia's government had to assume billions in debt, and legal cases followed across the US, Switzerland, Singapore. The story of Joe Low shows how unchecked ambition and borrowed power can create an empire that looks bulletproof until the truth catches up. Archegos Capital. Bill Huang started as a protege of Julian Robertson at Tiger Management. After running Tiger Asia, he was banned from managing public money in 2012 following insider trading charges. But Huang wasn't done. In 2013, he launched Archegos Capital, a private family office exempt from many disclosure rules. Using complex financial instruments called total return swaps, Huang quietly built massive positions in a handful of stocks like Viacom CBS, Discovery, and Tencent Music. These swaps let him borrow heavily without owning shares directly. At its peak, Archegos had over $100 billion in market exposure, backed by just $10 billion in real capital. In March 2021, Viacom CBS stock fell after a surprise share offering. That triggered margin calls from banks. Huang couldn't meet them. The result? A fire sale. In 2 days, over $20 billion was wiped out as Archegos collapsed. Global banks were blindsided. Credit Suisse lost $5.5 billion. Nomura lost $2.9 billion. Even giants like Morgan Stanley and UBS took hits, all from one man's unchecked bets. In 2022, Huang was arrested and charged with fraud, market manipulation, and racketeering. If convicted, he faces hundreds of years in prison. He has pleaded not guilty and awaits trial. The fall of Bill Huang shows just how fragile global finance can be when excessive leverage hides behind opaque tools. It proves you don't need a public hedge fund to cause a multi-billion-dollar meltdown. One man, one loophole, billions lost. The case of Archegos warns us, in modern markets, hidden leverage is a ticking time bomb. When banks ignore red flags, the blast radius reaches far beyond one trader. Kingfisher Airlines. Born in 1955, Vijay Mallya inherited the United Breweries business in India, later expanding into airlines, media, and other ventures. He launched Kingfisher Airlines in 2005, promising luxury service, global routes, and strong growth. Kingfisher grew glamorous, expensive branding, flashy ads, and celebrity associations, but beneath the surface, the airline was losing money almost every year. By 2012, Kingfisher had lost its license to operate flights, could no longer pay staff, and was defaulting on loans. What began as expansion turned into overreach. Banks loaned money even as losses piled up. By 2015, Kingfishers owed more than $1.35 billion to banks alone. Legal battles escalated over unpaid debts, charges of defaulting, and allegations of money laundering. Mallya eventually left India, governments sought extradition, many assets remained tied up in courts. The downfall of Vijay Mallya shows what happens when flamboyance overshadows fundamentals. A lifestyle cannot save a sinking business. Wirecard. Marcus Braun was the mastermind behind Wirecard, once hailed as Europe's answer to PayPal. When he took over as CEO in 2002, the company was a small digital payments firm. But under Braun's leadership, it grew at breakneck speed, acquiring companies around the world and riding the fintech wave to dizzying heights. By 2018, Wirecard was worth over $28 billion, even securing a coveted spot in Germany's DAX 30 index, replacing Commerzbank. Investors and analysts couldn't get enough. But behind the glossy headlines and sharp suits, something was off. Journalists, especially at the Financial Times, repeatedly flagged suspicious activity, phantom profits, opaque subsidiaries in Asia, and unexplained cash movements. Yet the company brushed it all off as smear campaigns. That illusion shattered in June 2020 when auditors at Ernst & Young refused to sign off on Wirecard's accounts. Over $2.1 billion, allegedly held in 2 Philippine bank accounts, was missing. In truth, it had never existed. Braun was arrested shortly after, charged with fraud, embezzlement, and market manipulation. The Wirecard collapse wasn't just a corporate scandal, it was a national embarrassment, exposing how even developed markets can overlook deep flaws when dazzled by tech-driven success. The story of Marcus Braun proves that when rapid growth is fueled by fiction, even the most celebrated empires can implode in full view of the world. Madoff Investment Securities. Bernie Madoff was once a symbol of Wall Street success. A former chairman of NASDAQ, he ran one of the most trusted investment firms in America, Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities. From movie stars to major banks, from charities to retirees, Madoff's client list read like a who's who of global finance. At its peak, his firm claimed to manage over $65 billion in assets, promising consistent, market-beating returns year after year. But it was all a lie. Behind the sleek office doors and polished image was the largest Ponzi scheme in history. For decades, Madoff fabricated trade records and sent out fake account statements. There were no real investments, just a cycle of robbing new investors to pay the old. As long as money kept pouring in, the illusion held. But in 2008, when the global financial crisis hit and panicked investors tried to cash out, the house of cards collapsed. Madoff confessed to his sons, who turned him in. In December 2008, he was arrested. The fallout was catastrophic. Thousands of investors, including charities, pension funds, and individuals, lost their entire life savings. Some foundations had to close overnight. Even seasoned hedge funds were caught off guard. Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in prison. He died behind bars in 2021, leaving behind a legacy of devastation. The story of Bernie Madoff reminds us that even the most polished reputations can hide rot, and when blind trust replaces due diligence, the cost can echo across generations. Terraform Labs. Do Kwon co-founded Terraform Labs around 2018, aiming to build a new crypto ecosystem centering on Terra USD and its sister token, Luna. His vision was bold. UST would be an algorithmic stablecoin pegged to the US dollar, not by holding reserves, but through a dynamic relationship with Luna. When UST's price drifted, arbitrage mechanisms would swap between UST and Luna to rebalance value. By early 2022, the combined market capitalization of UST and Luna exceeded $50 billion. The system also included the Anchor protocol, which offered extremely high yields up to tilde 20% on UST deposits, drawing massive amounts of investor capital. But the model was fragile. In May 2022, UST broke from its $1 peg. Large redemptions and market pressure triggered a cascade. UST holders swapped en masse to Luna, flooding the supply, which rapidly collapsed Luna's value. The system had no real backing to absorb the shock. Within days, both tokens crashed towards zero, wiping out tens of billions. Afterward, Do Kwon was captured trying to travel with fake documents and extradited to the US. In August 2025, he pleaded guilty to fraud charges related to the crash, admitting that misleading statements about the algorithmic stability contributed to investor losses estimated near $40 billion. The case of Do Kwon teaches us that in crypto, complexity is not a safety net, it's a threat. When stability is promised by code without collateral, ambition becomes its own risk. Stanford International Bank. Alan Stanford styled himself as a Texas billionaire with Caribbean flair. With his flashy suits, private jets, and a swagger that could fill a stadium, he built an image of global wealth and influence. He owned a professional cricket team, sponsored international tournaments, and ran Stanford International Bank based in Antigua, a bank he claimed held $8 billion in assets. He even made it onto the Forbes Billionaires list, appearing to be one of the most successful men in finance. But behind the charisma was a house of mirrors. Stanford lured investors with promises of high returns on certificates of deposit, supposedly backed by secure, conservative investments. But the truth was far more sinister. His empire was actually a $7 billion Ponzi scheme, one of the largest ever exposed. He used new investors' money to pay off earlier clients while funding his extravagant lifestyle, buying yachts, private islands, and political connections. In 2009, U.S. regulators cracked down. Investigations revealed falsified reports, bribery of Antiguan officials, and a near-total absence of legitimate investments. Stanford was arrested, convicted on multiple counts of fraud and obstruction, and sentenced to 110 years in prison. Despite the luxurious exterior, there was no financial brilliance behind it all, just a con man in a well-cut suit. His downfall wiped out retirement funds, shattered investor trust, and exposed how even international banking systems could be manipulated through image and influence. The case of Alan Stanford proves that when confidence is used to cover up corruption, even billions can vanish overnight, and the ones who suffer most are those who believe the dream was real. Parmalat. Callisto Tanzi founded Parmalat in 1961 as a dairy company in Parma, Italy, and built it into a global food conglomerate. Its rise was celebrated. By the 1990s and early 2000s, Parmalat operated across dozens of countries, producing milk, juices, and dairy products, reporting steady growth and high leverage. But in late 2003, the empire collapsed in what became Europe's largest bankruptcy. The trigger? The company revealed that 4.9 billion euros in cash supposedly held in a Cayman Islands affiliate, Ponzi, did not exist. When regulators and banks investigated, they discovered a massive web of forged documents, off-balance sheet liabilities, shell companies, and accounting fraud stretching back years. In the days that followed, Parmalat filed for bankruptcy in December 2003. The revealed debt exceeded 15 billion euro, making it one of the largest corporate failures in European history. Tanzi and several top executives were arrested and later convicted for fraudulent bankruptcy, falsifying accounts, and misappropriation of funds. The scandal also ensnared major banks and auditors, many of whom were accused of aiding or failing to detect the fraud. The collapse wiped out equity holders and left bondholders, small investors, and suppliers with huge losses. The case of Parmalat shows that size and fame offer no immunity when deception becomes the foundation. When control is concentrated and checks are weak, billions can vanish under the guise of success.